Hi, it's Carly. I know that we haven't been reading in a very long time. I'm sorry about that. Our system needed a little bit of a break because there's been a lot of drama, and I'm sorry about not reading for a while, but hi, I'm here to read. So we're on our last leg of Harry Potter. 16 and 17 are the last chapters. And then we'll move on to another book. Could be another Harry Potter book, or it could be something else. Um, but hi everyone. Welcome back. Also, this right here, I have no idea what happened. I think Zoe injured us at work somehow. So, all right. Um, Chapter 16. Through the trapdoor. In years to come, Harry would never quite remember how he had managed to get through his exams, when he half expected Voldemort to come bursting through the door at any moment. Yet the days crept by, and there could be no doubt that Fluffy was still alive, and well behind the locked door. It was sweltering hot, especially in large classrooms where they did their written papers. There had been they had been given special new quills for the exams, which had been bewitched with an anti-cheating spell. They had practical exams as well. Professor Flitwick called them one by one into his class to see if they could make a pineapple tap dance across the desk. Professor McGonagall watched them turn a mouse into a snuff box. Points were given for how pretty the snuff box was, but taken away if it had whiskers. Snape made them all nervous, breathing down their necks, and while they tried to remember how to make forgetfulness potions. Ironic, forgetting how to make a forgetfulness potion. Harry did the best he could, trying to ignore the stabbing pains in his forehead, which had been bothering him ever since his trip into the forest. Neville thought Harry had a bad case of exam nerves because Harry couldn't sleep, but the truth was that Harry kept being woken up by his old nightmares. Except except that it was now worse than ever because there were hooded figures dripping blood in it. Maybe it was because they hadn't seen what Harry had seen in the forest, or because they didn't have scars burning on their foreheads, but Ron and Hermione didn't seem as worried about the stone as Harry. The idea of Voldemort certainly scared them, but he didn't keep visiting them in dreams, and they were so busy with their studying they didn't have much time to fret about what Snape or anyone else might be up to. There was their very last exam was History of Magic, 1 hour of answering questions about batty old wizards who'd invented self-stirring cauldrons, and they'd be free. Free for a whole wonderful week until their exam results came out. When the ghost of Professor Binns told them to put down their quills and roll up their parchment, Harry couldn't help cheering with the rest. That was far easier than I expected it would be, said Hermione, as they joined the crowds flocking out onto the sunny grounds. I need I needn't have learned about the 1637 Werewolf Code of Conduct or the uprising of Elfric Eager. Hermione always liked to go through their exam papers afterwards, but Ron said this made him feel ill, so they wandered down to the lake and flopped under a tree. The Weasley twins and Lee Jordan were tickling the tentacles of a giant squid which was baking in the warm shallows. No, sorry. No, we're studying. Ron sighed happily, stretching out onto the grass. You could look more cheerful, Harry. We've got a week before we find out how badly we've done. There's no need to worry yet. Harry was rubbing his forehead. I wish I knew what this means, he burst out angrily. My scar keeps hurting. It happened before, but never as often as this. Go to Madame Pomfrey, Hermione suggested. I'm not ill, said Harry. I think it's a warning. It means danger's coming. Ron couldn't get worked up. It was too hot. Harriet, relax. Hermione's right. The stone's safe as long as Dumbledore's around. Anyway, we've never had any proof Snape's found out how to get past Fluffy. He nearly had his leg ripped off once. He's not going to try it again in a hurry, and Neville will play Quidditch for England before Hagrid lets Dumbledore down. Harry nodded, but he couldn't shake off a lurking feeling that there was something he'd forgotten to do, something important. When he tried to explain this to Hermione, she said, that's just the exams. I woke up last night and was halfway through my transfiguration notes before I remembered we'd done that one. Harry was quite sure that the unsettled feeling didn't have anything to do with work, though he watched an owl flutter towards the school across the bright blue sky, a note clamped in its mouth. Hagrid was the only one who ever sent him letters. Hagrid would never betray Dumbledore. Hagrid would never tell anyone how to get past Fluffy. Never, but Harry jumped to his feet suddenly. Where are you going? Said Ron sleepily. I've just thought of something, said Harry. He had turned white. "We've got to go and see Hagrid now." "Why?" panted Hermione, hurrying to keep up. "Don't you think it's a bit odd," said Harry, scrambling up the grassy slope, that what Hagrid wants more than anything else in the world is a dragon, and a stranger turns up who just so happens to have an egg in his pocket. How many people wander around with dragon's eggs if it's against wizard law? Lucky they found Hagrid, don't you think? Why didn't I see this before?" "What are you talking about?" said Ron, but Harry, sprinting across the grounds towards the forest, didn't answer. Hagrid was sitting in an armchair outside his house. His trousers and sleeves were rolled up, and he was shelling peas into a large bowl. "Hello," he said, smiling. "Finished your exams? Got time for a drink?" "Yes, please," said Ron, but Harry cut him off. "No, we're in a hurry, Hagrid. I've got to ask you something. You know that night you won Norbert? What did the stranger you were playing cards with look like?" "Dunno," said Hagrid casually. He wouldn't take his cloak off. He saw the three of them look stunned and raised his eyebrow. "It's not that unusual. You get a lot of funny folk in Hogshead. That's the pub down in the village. Might have been a dragon dealer, mightn't he? I never saw his face. He kept his hood up." Harry sank down next to the bowl of peas. "Why, what did you talk to him about, Hagrid? Did you mention Hogwarts at all?" "Might have come up," said Hagrid, frowning. He tried to remember. "Yeah, he asked what I did, and I told him I was gamekeeper here. He asked a bit about the sort of creatures I looked after, so I told him, and I said what I'd always really wanted was a dragon, and then I can't remember too well, 'cause he kept buying me drinks. Let's see, yeah, then he said he had the dragon egg, and we could play for cards for it, if I wanted, but he had to be sure I could handle it. He didn't want to go to any old home, so I told him, after Fluffy, a dragon would be easy." "And did he seem interested in Fluffy?" Harry asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Well, yeah. How many three-headed dogs do you meet, even around Hogwarts? So I told him Fluffy's a piece of cake if you know how to calm him down. Just play him a bit of music and he'll go straight off to sleep." "Hagrid," said Lily, horrified. "I shouldn't have told you that," he blurted out. "Forget I said it. Hey, where are you going?" Harry, Ron, and Hermione didn't speak to each other at all until they had came to a hall in the entrance hall, which seemed very cold and gloomy after the grounds. "We've got to go to Dumbledore," said Harry. "Hagrid told the stranger how to get past Fluffy, and it was either Snape or Voldemort under that cloak. It must have been easy once he'd gotten Hagrid drunk. I just hope I just hope Dumbledore believes us. Frenzy might back us up if Bane doesn't stop him." What's Dumbledore's where's Dumbledore's office?" They looked around as if hoping to see a signpost, then to lead them in the right direction. They had never been told where Dumbledore lived, nor did they know anyone who had been sent to see him. "We'll just have to," Harry began, but a voice suddenly rang across the hall. "What are you three doing inside?" It was Professor McGonagall, carrying a large pile of books. Sorry. "We want to see Professor Dumbledore," said Hermione, rather bravely. Harry and Ron thought. "See, Professor Dumbledore," Professor McGonagall repeated, as though this was a very fishy thing to want to do. "Why?" Harry swallowed. "Now what? It's sort of a secret," he said, but he wished at once he hadn't. What did I just call her? Before Professor McGonagall's nostrils flared. "Professor Dumbledore left 10 minutes ago," she said coldly. "He received an urgent owl from the Ministry of Magic and flew off to London at once." "He's gone?" said Harry frantically. "Now?" "Professor Dumbledore is a very great wizard, Potter. He has many demands on his time. But this is important. Something you have to say is more important than the Minister of Magic, Potter." "Look," said Harry, throwing caution to the wind. "Professor, it's about the Sorcerer's Stone." Whatever Professor McGonagall had expected, it wasn't that. The books she was carrying tumbled out of her arms, but she didn't pick them up. "How do you know?" she spluttered. "Professor, I think I know that someone's going to try and Wow, yes, Dumbledore's gonna try to steal the stone. That's a twist. Whoops. Someone's going to try and steal the stone. I've got to talk to Professor Dumbledore." She eyed him with a mixture of shock and suspicion. "Professor Dumbledore will be back tomorrow," she said finally. "I don't know how you found out about the stone, but rest assured, no one could possibly steal it. It's too well protected." "But Professor Potter, I know what I'm talking about," she said shortly. She bent down and gathered up the fallen books. "I suggest you all go back inside. Outside enjoy the sunshine." But they didn't. "It's tonight," said Harry. once he was sure Professor McGonagall was out of earshot. Snape's gone through the trapdoor tonight. He found out everything he needs, and now he's got Dumbledore out of the way. He sent the note. I bet the Ministry of Magic will get a real shock when Dumbledore turns up. But what can we... Hermione gasped. Harry and Ron wheeled around. Snape was standing there. Good afternoon, he said smoothly. They stared at him. You shouldn't be inside on a day like this, he said with an odd twisted smile. We were... Harry began without any idea what he was going to say. You want to be more careful, said Snape. Hanging around like this, people will think you're up to something, and Gryffindor can't really afford to lose any points, can it? Any more points, can it? Harry flushed. They turned to go outside, but Snape called them back. Be warned, Potter. Any more nighttime wanderings, and I'll personally make sure you are expelled. Good day to you. He strode off in the direction of the staff room. Out on the stone steps, Harry turned to the others. Right here's what we've got to do, he whispered urgently. One of us has got to keep an eye on Snape. Wait outside the staff room and follow him if he leaves it. Hermione, you better do that. Why me? It's obvious, said Ron. You can pretend to be waiting for Professor Flitwick, you know. He put on a high voice. Oh, Professor Flitwick, I'm so worried. I think I got a few question 14B wrong. Oh, shut up, said Hermione, but she agreed to do it. She agreed to go and watch out for Snape. And we better stay outside the third floor corridor, Harry told Ron. Come on. But that part of the plan didn't work. No sooner that they had reached the door separating Fluffy from the rest of the school than Professor McGonagall turned up again, and this time she lost her temper. I suppose you think you're harder to get past than a pack of enchantments, she stormed. Enough of this nonsense. If I hear you've come across anywhere near here again, I'll take another 50 points from Gryffindor. Yes, Weasley, from my own house. Harry and Ron went back to the common room. Harry had just said, at least Hermione's on Snape's tail. When the portrait of the fat lady swung open, Hermione came in. I'm so sorry, Harry, she wailed. Snape came out and she asked me what I was doing, so I said I was waiting for Flitwick, and Snape went to get him, and I've only just got away. I don't know where Snape went. Well, that's it then, isn't it? Said Harry. The other two stared at him. He was pale and his eyes were glittering. I'm going out of here tonight, and I'm going to try and get on the stone first. You're mad, said Ron. You can't, said Hermione. After what McGonagall and Snape have said, you'll be expelled. So what? Harry shouted. Don't you understand? If Snape gets a hold of the stone, Voldemort is coming back. Haven't you heard what it's like when he was trying to take over? There won't be any Hogwarts to get expelled from. He'll flatten it or turn it into a school for the dark arts. Losing points doesn't matter anymore. Can't you see? Do you think he'll leave you and your families alone if Gryffindor wins the house cup? If I get caught before I can get to the stone, well, I'll have to go back to the Dursleys and wait for Voldemort to find me there. It's only dying a bit later than I would have, but because I've never gone over to the dark side. I'm going through that trapdoor tonight, and nothing you two is going to stop me. Voldemort killed my parents, remember? He glared at them. You're right, Harry, said Hermione in a small voice. I'll use the invisibility cloak, said Harry. It's just lucky I got it back. And will it cover all three of us? Said Ron. All three of us? Oh, come off it. You don't think we'll let you go alone? Of course not, said Hermione briskly. How do you think you'd get to the stone without us? I'd better go and look through my books. There might be something useful. But what if we get caught? You two will be expelled too. Not if I can help it, said Hermione grimly. Flitwick told me in secret that I got 112% on his exam. They're not throwing me out after that. After dinner, the three of them sat nervously apart in the common room. Nobody bothered them. None of the Gryffindors had anything to say to Harry anymore, after all. This was their first night he hadn't been upset by it. Hermione was skimming through all her notes, hoping to come across one of the enchantments they were about to try to break. Harry and Ron didn't talk too much. Both of them were thinking about what they were about to do. Slowly, the room emptied as people drifted off to bed. Better get the cloak, Ron muttered, as Lee Jordan finally left, stretching and yawning. Harry ran upstairs to their dark dormitory. He pulled out the cloak, and then his eyes fell on the flute Hagrid had given him for Christmas. He pocketed it to use on Fluffy. He didn't feel much like singing. He ran back downstairs to the common room. We'd better put on the cloak here and make sure it covers all three of us. If Filch spots one of our feet wandering around along on its own. What are you doing? Said a small voice from the corner of the room. Neville appeared from behind an armchair, clutching Trevor, the toad, who looked as though he had been making another bid for freedom. Nothing, Neville, nothing, said Harry, hurriedly putting the cloak behind his back. Neville stared at their guilty faces. You're going out again, he said. No, 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 said Hermione. No, we're not. Why don't you go to bed, Neville? Harry looked at the godfather clock by the door. They can't afford to waste any more time. Snape might have even now been playing Fluffy to sleep. You can't go out, said Neville. You'll be caught again. Gryffindor will be even more even trouble. You don't understand, said Harry. This is important. But Neville was clearly steeling himself to do something desperate. I won't let you do it, he said, hurrying to stand up in front of the portrait hole. I'll fight you. Neville, Ron exploded. Get away from that hole. Don't be an idiot. Don't call me an idiot, said Neville. I don't think you should be breaking any more rules, and you are the ones who told me to stand up to to people. Yes, but not us, said Ron in exasperation. Neville, you don't know what you're doing. He took a step forward, and Neville dropped Trevor the Toad, who leapt out of sight. Go then, try, and hit me, said Neville, raising his fist. I'm ready. Harry turned to Hermione. Do something, he said desperately. Hermione stepped forward. Neville, she said, I'm really, really sorry about this. She raised her wand. Pertificus totalis, she cried, pointing it at Neville. Neville's arm snapped to his side. His legs spread together, his whole body rigid. He swayed where he stood and then fell flat on his face, stiff as a board. Hermione ran to turn him over. Neville's jaws were jammed together so he couldn't speak. Only his eyes were moving, looking at them in horror. What have you done to him? Harry whispered. It's the full body bind, said Hermione miserably. Oh, Neville, I'm so sorry. We had to, Neville. No time to explain, said Harry. You'll understand later, Neville, said Ron, as they stepped over him and pulled on the invisibility cloak. But leaving Neville lying motionless on the floor didn't feel like a very good omen. In their nervous state, every statue's shadow looked like Filch. Every distant breath of the wind sounded like Peeves swooping down on them. At the foot of the first set of stairs, they spotted Mrs. Norris skulking near the top. Oh, let's kick her just this once, Ron whispered in Harry's ear, but Harry shook his head. As they climbed carefully around her, Mrs. Norris turned her lamp-like eyes on them, but didn't do anything. They didn't meet anyone else until they reached the staircase up onto the third floor. Peeves was bobbing halfway up, loosening the carpet so that people would trip. Who's there? He said suddenly as they climbed towards him. He narrowed his wicked eyes. No, you're there, even if I can't see you. Are you a ghoulie or a ghostie or a wee student beastie? He rose in the air and floated there, squinting at them. Should call Filch, I should, if something's a creeping around unseen. Harry had a sudden idea. Peeves, he said in a hoarse whisper. The bloody Baron has his own reasons for being invisible. Peeves almost fell out of the air, in shock. He caught himself in time and hovered about a foot off the stairs. So sorry, your bloodiness. Mr. Baron, sir, he said greasily. My mistake, my mistake. I didn't see you, of course I didn't. You're invisible. Forgive old Peasy his little joke, sir. I have business here, Pease, croaked Harry. Stay away from this place tonight. I will, sir, I will most certainly will, said Pease, rising up in the air again. Hope your business goes well, Baron. I will not bother you. And he scooted off. Brilliant, Harry, whispered Ron. A few seconds later, they were there, outside the third floor corridor, and the door was already ajar. Well, there you are, said Harry quietly. Snape's already got past Fluffy. Seeing the open door somehow seemed to impress upon all three of them that they were that what was facing them. Blame you, he said. You can take the cloak. I won't need it now. Don't be stupid, said Ron. We're coming, said Hermione. Harry pushed the door open. As the door creaked low, rumbling growls met their ears. All of the three dogs' noses sniffed madly in the direction, even though it couldn't see them. What's at its feet? Hermione whispered. Looks like a harp. Snape must have left it there. It must have woken up the moment you stopped playing, said Harry. Well, here goes. He put Hagrid's flute to his lips and blew. It wasn't really a tune, but from the first note the bee's eyes began to droop. Harry hardly breathed. Slowly the dog's growls ceased. It tottered onto his paws and fell to its knees, then slumped onto the ground, fast asleep. Keep playing, Ron warned Harry as they slipped out of the cloak and crept towards the trapdoor. They could feel the dog's hot, smelly breath as they approached the giant heads. I think we'll be able to pull the door open, said Ron, peering over the dog's back. We want to go first, Hermione. No, I don't. All right. Ron gritted his teeth and stepped carefully over the dog's legs. He bent and pulled the ring of the trapdoor, which swung up and open. What can you see? Hermione said anxiously. Nothing, just black. There's no way of climbing down. We'll just have to drop. Harry, who was still playing the flute, waved at Ron to get his attention and pointed at himself. You want to go first? Are you sure? Said Ron. I don't know how deep this thing goes. Give the flute to Hermione so she can keep him asleep. Harry handed the flute over. In a few seconds of silence, the dog growled and twitched, but the moment Hermione began to play, it fell back into the deep sleep. All I can think about is this picture I saw, and it said, How did Hogwarts sleep when three teenagers who didn't know how to play music played a very crude version of hot cross buns? That's all I can think about right now. Sorry. Harry climbed over it and looked down through the trapdoor. There was no sign of the bottom. He lowered himself through the hole until he was hanging on by his fingertips. Then he looked at Ron and said, If anything happens to me, don't follow. Go straight to the owlery and send Hedwig to Dumbledore, right? Right, said Ron. See you in a minute, I hope. And Harry let go. Cold, damp air rushed past him as he fell down, and plump. With a funny, muffled sort of thump, he landed on something soft. He sat up and felt around, his eyes not used to the gloom. It felt as though he was sitting on some sort of plant. It's okay, he called up to the light the size of a postage stamp, which was the open trap door. It's a soft landing. You can jump. Ron followed right away. He landed sprawled next to Harry. What's this stuff? Were his first words. Dunno, some sort of plant thing, I suppose. It's here to break the fall. Come on, Hermione! The distant music stopped. There was a loud bark from the dog, but Hermione had already jumped. She landed on Harry's other side. We must be miles into the school, she said. Lucky this plant thing is here, really, said Ron. Lucky? Shrieked Hermione. Look at the both of you! She leapt up and struggled toward a damp wall. She had to struggle because the moment she had landed, the plants had started to twist snake-like tendrils around her ankles. As for Harry and Ron, their legs had already been bound tightly in long creepers without them noticing. Hermione had managed to free herself before the plant got a firm grip on her. Now she watched in horror as the two boys fought to pull the plant off them. But the more they strained against it, the tighter and faster the plant wound around them. Stop moving, Hermione ordered them. I know what this is. It's Devil's Snare. Oh, I'm so glad we know what it's called. That's a great help, snarled Ron, leaning back, trying to stop the plant from curling around his neck. Shut up! I'm trying to remember how to kill it, said Hermione. Well, hurry up. I can't breathe, Harry gasped, wrestling with it as it curled around his chest. Devil snare, what did Professor Spout say? It likes the dark and damp, so light a fire, Harry choked. Yes, of course, and there's no wood, Hermione cried, wringing her hands. Have you gone mad? Ron bellowed. Are you a witch or not? Oh, right, said Hermione, and she whipped out her wand, waved it, muttered something, and set a jet of some blue bell flames she had used on Snape at the plant. In a matter of seconds, the two boys felt loosening its grip as it cringed away from the light and warmth. Wriggling and flailing, it unraveled itself from their bodies, and they were able to pull free. Lucky you pay attention in herbology, Hermione, said Harry as he joined her by the wall, wiping sweat off his face. Yeah, said Ron, and lucky Harry doesn't lose his head in a crisis. There's no wood, honestly. This way, said Harry, pointing down a stone passageway, which was the only way forward. All they could hear, apart from their footsteps, the gentle drip of water trickling down the walls. The passageway sloped downward, and Harry was reminded of Gringotts, with an unpleasant jolt in his heart. He remembered the dragons had to be guarding vaults in the wizard's banks. If they met a dragon, a fully grown dragon, Nober had been bad enough. Can you hear something? Ron whispered. Harry listened. A soft rustling and a clinking seemed to be coming from ahead. Do you think it's a ghost? I don't know. Sounds like wings to me. There's a light ahead. I can see something moving. They reached the end of the passageway and saw before them a brilliantly lit chamber in ceiling archway high above them. It was full of small, jewel bright birds, fluttering and tumbling around the room. On the opposite side of the chamber was a heavy wooden door. Do you think they'll attack us if we cross the room? Said Ron. Probably, said Harry. They don't look very vicious, but I suppose if they all swoop down at once, well, there's no other choice. I'll run. He took a deep breath, covered his face with his arms, and sprinted across the room. He expected to feel sharp beaks and claws tearing at him at any second, but nothing happened. He reached the door untouched. He pulled the handle, but it was locked. The other two followed him. They tugged and heaved at the door, but it wouldn't budge, not even when Hermione tried her Alahomora charm. Now what? Said Ron. These birds, they can't be here for decoration, said Hermione. They watched the birds soaring high overhead, glittering. Glittering? They're not birds, Harry said suddenly. They're keys, winged keys. Look carefully. So that must mean. He looked around the chamber walls. The other two squinched up at the flock of keys. Yes, look, broomsticks. We've got to catch the key to the door. But there was hundreds of them. Ron examined the lock of on the door. We're looking for a big old-fashioned one, probably silver like the handle. Yeah, they each seized a broomstick and kicked off into the air, soaring into the midst of the cloud of the keys. They grabbed and snatched, but the bewildered keys darted and dived so quickly it was almost impossible to catch one. Not for nothing, though, was Harry the youngest seeker in the century. He had a knack for spotting things that other people didn't. After a minute of weaving around the whirl of rainbow feathers, he noticed a large key that had a bent wing, as if it had been caught and stuffed roughly into the keyhole. That one, he called to the others. That big one. There. No, there. With the bright blue wings. The feathers are all crumpled up on one side. Ron went speeding in that direction, then Harry was pointing and crashed into the ceiling, nearly falling off his broom. We've got to close in on it, Harry called, not taking his eyes off the key with the damaged wing. Ron, you come of it from above. Hermione, stay below and stop it from going down, and I'll try to catch it. Right now! Ron dived, Hermione rocketed upward. The key dodged them both, and Harry streaked after it. It sped toward the wall. Harry leaned forward with a nasty crunching sound, pinned it against the stone with one hand. Ron and Hermione's cheers echoed around the high chambers. They landed quickly, and Harry ran to the door, the key struggling in his hand. He rammed it into the lock and turned it. It worked. The moment the lock had clicked open, the key took flight again, looking very battered now that it had been caught twice. Ready? Harry asked the other two, his hand on the door handle. They nodded. He pulled the door open. The next chamber was so dark they couldn't see anything at all, but as they stepped into it, light suddenly flooded the room to reveal an astonishing sight. They were standing on the edge of a huge chessboard behind the black chessmen, which were all taller than they were and carved from what looked like black stone. Facing them, way across the chamber, were the white pieces. Harry, Ron, and Hermione shivered slightly. The towering white chessmen had no faces. Now what do we do? Harry whispered. It's obvious, isn't it? Said Ron. We've got to play our way across the room. Behind the white pieces, they could see another door. How? Said Hermione nervously. I think, said Ron, we're going to have to be the chessmen. Also, this is one of my favorite part of the book. How? Said Hermione nervously. I think, said Ron, we're going to have to be chessmen. He walked up to the Black Knight and put his hand out to touch the knight's horse. At once, the stone sprung to life. The horse pawed the ground, and the knight turned his helmed head to look down at Ron. Do we have to join to get across? The Black Knight nodded. Ron turned to the other two. This needs thinking about, he said. I suppose we've got to take the place of 3 of the black pieces. Harry and Hermione stayed quiet, watching Ron think. Finally, he said, Now, don't be offended or anything, but neither of you are that good at chess. We're not offended, said Harry quickly. Just tell us what to do. Well, Harry, you take the place of that bishop, and Hermione, you'll go next to him instead of that castle. What about you? I'm going to be a knight, said Ron. The chessmen seemed to have been listening, because at these words, a knight, a bishop, and a castle turned their backs on the white pieces and walked off the board, leaving their 3 squares empty that Harry and Ron and Hermione took. White always plays first in chess, said Ron, peering across the board. Yes, look. The white pawn had moved forward 2 spaces. Ron stared to direct the black pieces. They moved silently wherever he sent them. Harry's knees were trembling. What if they lost? Harry, move diagonally 4 squares to the right. Their first real shot came when the other knight was taken. The white queen smashed him to the floor and dragged him off the board, where he lay quite still, face down. Had to let that happen, said Ron, looking shaken. Leaves you free to take the battleship. Hermione, go on. Every time one of their men was lost, the white pieces showed no mercy. Soon there was a huddle of limp black players slumped along the wall. Twice, Ron only just noticed in time that Harry and Hermione were in danger. He himself darted around the board taking almost as many white pieces as they had lost black ones. "We're nearly there," he muttered suddenly. Let me think. The White Queen turned her blank face towards him. "Yes," said Ron. "It's the only way. I've got to be taken." "No!" Harry and Hermione shouted. "That's chess," snapped Ron. "You've got to make some sacrifices. I take one step forward and she'll take me. That leaves you to free to checkmate the king, Harry. But do you want to stop Snape or not? Ron, look, if you don't hurry up, he'll already have the stone. There's no alternative. Ready?" Ron called, his face pale but determined. "Here I go. Now don't hang around once you've won." He stepped forward and the White Queen pounced. She struck Ron hard across the head with her stone arm, and he crashed to the floor. Hermione screamed but stayed up on her square. The White Queen dragged Ron to one side. He looked as if he had been knocked down. Shaking, Harry moved 3 spaces to the left. The White King took off his crown and threw it at Harry's feet. They had won. The chessmen parted and bowed, leaving the door ahead clear. With one desperate look back at Ron, Harry and Hermione charged through the door and up to the next passageway. "What if he'll be all right," said Harry, trying to convince himself. "What do you reckon next?" "We've had Sprouch, that's Devil Snares. Flitwick must have put the charms on the keys. McGonagall transferred the chessmen to make them alive. That leaves Quirrell's spell and Snape's." They had reached another door. "All right," Harry whispered. "Go on." Harry pushed it open. A disgusting smell filled their nostrils, making both of them pull their robes up to their noses. Eyes watering, they saw flat on the floor in front of them a troll even larger than the one they had tackled, out cold and with a bloody lump on its head. "I'm glad we didn't have to fight that one," Harry whispered as they stepped carefully over one of his massive legs. "Come on, I can't breathe." He pulled open the next door, both of them hardly daring to look at what come next. But there was nothing very frightening in here, just a table with 7 different shaped bottles standing on its line. "Snape," said Harry, "what do we what do we have to do?" They stepped over the threshold and immediately a fire sprang up behind them in the doorway. It wasn't ordinary fire either. It was purple. In the same instant, black flames shot up in the doorway leading onward. They were trapped. "Look!" Hermione seized a roll of paper lying next to the bottles. Harry looked over her shoulder to read it. "Danger lies before you while safety lies behind. 2 of us will help you whichever you would find. One among us 7 will let you move ahead. Another will transport the drinker back instead. 2 among our number hold the nettle wine. 3 of us are killers waiting hidden in line. Choose unless you wish to stay here forevermore. To help you in your choice, we've given you these clues for. First, however slyly the postman tries to hide, you will always find some on nettle wine's left side. Second difference are those who stand at either end, but if you would move forward, neither is your friend. Third, as you see clearly, are all different size. Neither dwarf nor giant holds death in their insides. Fourth, the second left and the second on the right are twins. Once you taste them, though different at first sight. Hermione let a great sigh, and Harry, amazed, saw that she was smiling. That was the very last thing he felt like doing. "Brilliant," said Hermione. "This isn't magic, it's logic, a puzzle. A lot of the greatest wizards haven't got an ounce of logic. They'd be stuck in here forever." "But so will we, won't we?" "Of course not," said Hermione. "Everything we need is here on this paper. 7 bottles, 3 are poison, 2 are wine. 1 will get us safely through the black fire, and 1 will get us back through the purple. But how do we know which one to drink? Give me a moment." Hermione read the paper several times, then she walked up and down the line of bottles, muttering to herself. Pointing at them, at last she clapped her hands. "Got it!" she said. "The smallest bottle will get us through the black fire towards the stone." Harry looked at the tiny bottle. "There's only enough there for one of us," he said. "That's hardly one swallow." They looked at each other. "Which one will get us back through the purple flames?" Hermione pointed at a rounded bottle at the right end of the line. "You drink that," said Harry. "No, listen. Get back and get Ron. Grab brooms from the flying key room. They'll get you out of the trap door and past Fluffy. Go straight to the Owlery and send Hedwig to Dumbledore. We need him. I might be able to hold Snape off for a while, but I'm no match for him, really. But Harry, what if you know who is with him?" "Well, I was lucky once, wasn't I?" said Harry, pointing at his scar. "I might get lucky again." Hermione's lip trembled, and then suddenly she dashed at Harry and threw her arms around him. "Hermione!" "Harry, you're a great wizard, you know." I'm not as good as you, said Harry, very embarrassed as she let go of him. Me? Said Hermione. Books and cleverness. There are more important things, friendship and bravery. Oh, Harry, be careful. You drink first, said Harry. You are sure which is which, aren't you? Positive, said Hermione. She took a long drink from the round bottle at the end and shuddered. It's not poison, said Harry anxiously. No, but it's like ice. Quick, go before it wears off. Good luck and take care. Go! Hermione turned and walked straight to the purple flyer. Harry took a deep breath and picked up the smallest bottle. He turned to the black flames. Here I come, he said, and he drank the little bottle in one gulp. It was indeed as though ice was flooding his body. He put the bottle down and walked forward. By the way, my favorite is book number 3 too. For a moment, he could see nothing but dark fire. Then he was on the other side, in the last chamber. There was already someone there, but it wasn't Snape. It wasn't even Voldemort. Chapter 17. The last chapter. The Man with Two Faces. It was Quirrell. You! Gasped Harry. Quirrell smiled. His face wasn't twitching at all. Me, he said calmly. I wondered whether I'd be meeting you here, Potter. But I thought Snape. Severus? Quirrell laughed, and it wasn't his usual quivering treble either, but cold and sharp. Yes, Severus does seem the type, doesn't he? So useful to have him swooping around like a overgrown bat. Next to him, who would suspect poor stuttering Professor Quirrell? Harry couldn't take it. This couldn't be true. It couldn't. But Snape tried to kill me. No, no, no. I tried to kill you. Your friend Miss Granger accidentally knocked me over as she rushed to set fire to Snape at the Quidditch match. She broke my eye contact with you. Another few seconds, and I have got you off that broom. I have managed it before then if Snape had been muttering a counter curse trying to save you. Snape was trying to save me? Of course, said Quirrell coolly. Why do you think he wanted to referee your next match? He was trying to make sure I didn't do it again. Funny, really. He needn't have bothered. I couldn't do anything with Dumbledore watching. All the other teachers thought Snape was going to try stop Gryffindor from winning. He did make himself unpopular. And what a waste of time when, after all that, I'm going to kill you tonight. Quirrell snapped his fingers. Rope sprang out of his thin air and wrapped themselves tightly around Harry. You're too nosy to live, Potter, scurrying around the school on Halloween like that. For all I knew, you'd seen me coming to look at what was guarding the stone. You let the troll in. Certainly. I have a little special gift with trolls. You must have seen what I did to the one in the chamber back there. Unfortunately, while everyone else was running around looking for it, Snape, who was already suspecting me, went straight to the third floor to head me off. And not only did my troll fail to beat you to death, that three-headed dog didn't even manage to bite Snape's leg off properly. Now, wait quietly, Potter. I need to examine this interesting mirror. It was only then that Harry realized what was standing behind Quirrell. It was the Mirror of Erised. This mirror is the key to finding the stone, Quirrell murmured, tapping his way around the frame. Truest Dumbledore to come up with something like this, but he's in London. I'll be far away by the time he gets back. All Harry could think of doing was to keep Quirrell talking and stop him from concentrating on the mirror. I saw you and Snape in the forest, he blurted out. Yes, said Quirrell idly, walking around the mirror to look at the back of him. At the back. He was on to me by that time, trying to find out how far I got. He suspected me all along, tried to frighten me as best he could, though he when I had as though as he could when I had Lord Voldemort on my side. Quirrell came back out from behind the mirror and stared hungrily into it. I see the stone. I'm presenting it to my master, but where is it? Harry struggled against the ropes binding him, but they didn't give. He had to keep Quirrell from giving his whole attention to the mirror. But Snape always seemed to hate me so much. Oh, he does, said Quirrell casually. Heavens, yes. He was at Hogwarts with your father, didn't you know? They loathed each other, but he never wanted you dead. But I heard you a few days ago sobbing. I thought Snape was threatening you. For the first time, a spasm of fear flitted across Quirrell's face. Sometimes, he said, I find it hard to follow my master's instructions. He's a great wizard, and I am weak. You mean he was there in the classroom with you? Harry gasped. He's with me wherever I go, said Quirrell quietly. I met him when I traveled around the world, a foolish young man I was. Then, full of ridiculous ideas about good and evil, Lord Voldemort showed me how wrong I was. There is no good and evil, there's only power, and those those too weak to seek it. Since then, I have served him faithfully, although I have let him down many times. He had to be very hard on me. Quirrell shivered suddenly. He does not forgive mistakes easily. When I failed to steal the stone from Gringotts, he was most displeased. He punished me, decided he would have to keep a closer watch on me. Quirrell's voice trailed away. Harry was remembering his trip to Diagon Alley. How could he have been so stupid? He'd seen Quirrell that very day, shaking hands with him at the Leaky Cauldron. Quirrell cursed under his breath. I don't understand. Isn't the stone inside the mirror? Should I break it? Harry's mind was racing. What I want more than anything else in the world at the moment, he thought, is to find the stone before Quirrell does. So if I look into the mirror, I should see myself finding it, which means I'll see where it's hidden. But how can I look without Quirrell realizing what I'm up to? He tried to edge to the left to get in front of the glass without Quirrell noticing, but the robes around his ankles were too tight. He tripped and fell over. Quirrell ignored him. I shouldn't laugh at that, but I just got an image in my head of that and him just like, you know, I'm sorry, that shouldn't be laughed at. He was still talking to himself. What does this mirror do? How does it work? Help me, master. And to Harry's horror, a voice answered, and the voice seemed to come from Quirrell himself. Use the boy. Use the boy. Quirrell rounded on Harry. Yes, Potter, come here. He clapped his hands once, and the robes binding Harry fell off. Harry got slowly to his feet. Come here, Quirrell repeated. Look in the mirror and tell me what you see. Harry walked towards him. I must lie, he thought desperately. I must look and lie about what I see. That's all. Quirrell moved close behind him. Harry breathed in the funny smell that seemed to come from Quirrell's turban. He closed his eyes. I also wanted to mention, I also want to mention that Fred and George throw snowballs at Quirrell's turban, hitting him right in the back of the head. The Weasley twins are legends. They hit Voldemort in the face with snowballs. I'm sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. I just thought that was kind of funny and awesome because yes. There you go. He closed his eyes, stepped in front of the mirror, and opened them again. He saw his reflection, pale and scared looking at first, but a moment later the reflection smiled at him. It put its hand into its pocket and pulled out a blood-red stone. It winked and put the stone back in its pocket, and as it did so, Harry felt something heavy drop into his real pocket. Somehow, incredibly, he'd gotten the stone. Well, said Quirrell impatiently, what do you see? Harry screwed up his courage. I see myself shaking hands with Dumbledore, he invented. I've won the House Cup for Gryffindor. Quirrell cursed again. Get out of the way, he said, as Harry moved aside. He felt the Sorcerer's Stone against his leg. Dare he make a break for it? But he hadn't walked 5 paces before a high-pitched voice spoke through Quirrell's lips wasn't moving. He lies! He lies! Potter, come back here! Quirrell shouted. Tell me the truth. What did you see? The high voice spoke again. Let me speak to him face to face. Master, you're not strong enough. I have enough strength for this. Harry felt as if the devil's snare was rooting him to the spot. He couldn't move a muscle. Petrified, he watched Quirrell reach up and begin to unwrap his turban. What was going on? The turban fell away. Quirrell's head looked strangely small without it. Then he turned slowly on the spot. Harry would have screamed, but he couldn't make a sound. Where there should have been back to Quirrell's head, there was a face, the most terrible face Harry had ever seen. It was chalk white with glowing red eyes and slits for nostrils like a snake. Harry Potter, it whispered. Harry tried to take a step backwards, but his legs wouldn't move. See what I have become, the face said. Mere shadow and vapor. I have a form only when I can share another's body, but there have always been those willing to let me into their hearts and minds. Unicorn blood has strengthened me these past weeks. You saw faithful Quirrell drinking it for me in the forest, and once I have the elixir of life, I will be able to create a body of my own. Now, don't you give me Now, why don't you give me that stone in your pocket? So he knew. The feeling suddenly surged back into Harry's legs. He stumbled backward. Don't be a fool, snarled the face. Better save your own life and join me, or you'll meet the same end as your parents. They died begging for your mercy. Liar! Harry shouted suddenly. Quirrell was walking backward at him so that Voldemort could see him. The evil face was now smiling. How touching, it hissed. I always value bravery. Yes, boy, your parents were brave. I killed your father first, and he put up a courageous fight. But your mother needn't have died. She was trying to protect you. Now give me that stone, unless you want her to have died in vain. Never! Harry sprang towards the flame door, but Voldemort screamed, Seize him! And the next second, Harry felt Quirrell's hands close around his wrist. At once, a needle-sharp pain seared across Harry's scar. His head felt as though it was about to split in two. He yelled, struggling with all his might, and to his surprise, Quirrell let him go of him. The pain in his head lessened. I can't speak, sorry. The pain in his head lessened. He looked around wildly to see where Quirrell had gone, and saw him hunched in pain looking at his fingers. They were blistering before his eyes. Seize him! Seize him! Shrieked Voldemort again, and Quirrell lunged, knocking Harry clean off his face. Face? Wow. Clean off his feet, landing on top of him, both hands around Harry's neck. Harry's scar was almost blinding him with pain, yet he could see Quirrell howling in agony. Master, I cannot hold him, my hands, my hands! And Quirrell, though pinning Harry to the ground with his knees, let go of his neck and stared, bewildered, at his own palms. Harry could see they looked burnt, raw, red, and shiny. Then kill him, fool, and be done, screeched Voldemort. Quirrell raised his hands to perform a deadly curse, but Harry, by instinct, reached up and grabbed Quirrell's face. Arg! Quirrell rolled off him, his face blistering too, and then Harry knew Quirrell couldn't touch his bare skin without suffering terrible pain. His only chance was to keep hold of Quirrell, keep him in pain long enough from him from doing the curse. Harry jumped to his feet, caught Quirrell by his arm, and hung on as tight as he could. Quirrell screamed and tried to throw Harry off. The pain in Harry's head was building, and he couldn't see. He could only hear Quirrell's terrible shrieks and Voldemort yells of kill him, and other voices, maybe in Harry's own head, crying, Harry, Harry! He felt Quirrell's arms wrenched from his grasp. No, all was lost, and fell into blackness, down, down, down. Something gold was glinting up just above him. The snitch! He tried to catch it, but his arms were too heavy. He blinked. It wasn't the snitch at all. It was a pair of glasses. How strange. He blinked again. The smiling face of Albus Dumbledore swam into view above him. Good afternoon, Harry, said Dumbledore. Harry stared at him. Then he remembered. Sir, the stone. It was Quirrell. He got the stone. Sir, quick. Calm yourself, dear boy. You are a little behind the times, said Dumbledore. Quirrell does not have the stone. Then who does, sir? Harry, please, relax, or Madame Pomfrey will have me thrown out. Harry swallowed and looked around him. He realized he must be in the hospital wing. He was lying in a bed with a white linen sheets, and next to him was a table piled high with what looked like half the candy shop. Tokens from your friends and admirers, said Dumbledore, beaming. What happened down in the dungeons between you and Professor Quirrell is a complete secret, so naturally, the whole school knows. That's how Hogwarts works. I believe your friends, Mr. Fred and George Weasley, were responsible trying to send you a toilet seat. No doubt they thought it would amuse you. Madame Pomfrey, however, felt it might not be very hygienic, and confiscated it. How long have I been in here? 3 days. Mr. Ronald Weasley and Miss Granger will be most relieved you have come round. They have been extremely worried. But, sir, the stone. I see you are not distracted. Very well, the stone Professor Quirrell did not manage to take from you. I arrived in time to prevent that, although you were doing a very well job on your own, I must say. You got there? You got Hermione's owl? We must have crossed in mid-air. No sooner had I reached London than you. It was you. I feared I might be too late. Sorry about that. My internet decided to be weird. I had just arrived just in time to pull Quirrell off you. It was you. I feared I might be too late. You nearly were. I couldn't have kept him off the stone much longer. Not the stone, boy, you. The effort involved nearly killed you. For one terrible moment there, I was afraid it had. As for the stone, it had been destroyed. Destroyed? Said Harry blankly. But your friend, Nicholas Flamel. Oh, you know about Nicholas, said Dumbledore, sounding quite delighted. You did do the thing properly, didn't you? Well, Nicholas and I had a little chat and agreed all's for the best. But that means he and his wife will die, won't they? Dumbledore smiled and looked and at the look of amazement on Harry's face. To one as young as you, I'm sure it seems incredible, but to Nicholas and Purnell, sorry, it really is like going to bed after a very, very long day. After all, to the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure. You know the stone was really not such a wonderful thing, as much money and life as you want. The two things most beings would choose above all. The trouble is, humans do have a knack of choosing precisely those things that are worse for them. Harry lay there, lost for words. Dumbledore hummed a little and smiled at the ceiling. Sir, said Harry, I've been thinking, sir, even if the stone's gone, you know who. Call him Voldemort, Harry. Always use the proper names for things. Fear of a name increases fear of the thing itself. Yes, sir. Well, Voldemort's going to try other ways of coming back, isn't he? I mean, hasn't gone, has he? No, Harry, he has not. He's still out there somewhere, perhaps looking for another body to share. Not being truly alive, he cannot be killed. He left Quirrell to die. He shows just as little mercy to his followers as to his enemies. Nevertheless, Harry, while you may only have delayed his return to power, and it will merely take someone else who is prepared to fight what seems a losing battle next time. If he is delayed again and again, why, he may never return to power. Harry nodded, but stopped quickly because it made his head hurt. Then he said, Sir, there are some other things I'd like to know, if you can tell me. Things I want to know the truth about. The truth? Dumbledore said. It is a beautiful and terrible thing, and should therefore be treated with great caution. However, I shall answer your question unless I have a very good reason not to. In which case, I beg you will forgive me. I shall not, of course, lie. Well, Voldemort said that he only killed his mother because she tried to killed my mother because she tried to stop him from killing me. Why would he want to kill me in the first place? Dumbledore sighed very deeply this time. Alas, the first thing you ask me, I cannot tell you. Not today, not now. You will know one day, but put it from your mind for now, Harry. When you are older, I know you hate to hear this. When you are ready, you will know. And Harry knew it was no good to argue. But why couldn't Quirrell touch me? Your mother died to save you. If there is one thing Voldemort cannot understand, it is love. He didn't realize that love is as powerful as your mother's for you leaves its own mark, not a scar, not a visible sign. To have been loved so deeply, even though the person who loves you is gone, will give us some protection forever. It is in your skin, in your very skin. Quirrell, full of hatred, greed, and ambition, sharing his soul with Voldemort, could not touch you for this reason. It was an agony to touch the person marked by something so good. Dumbledore now became very interested in a bird out of the windowsill, which gave Harry time to dry his eyes on the sheets. When he had found his voice again, Harry said, And the invisibility cloak? Do you know who sent it to me? Ah, your father happened to leave it in my possession, and I thought you might like it. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. Useful things. Your father used it mainly for sneaking off to kitchens to steal the food when he was here. And there's something else. Fire away. Quirrell said Snape. Professor Snape, Harry. Yes, him. Such sass, Harry. Yes, him. Yes, him, Quirrell said. He hates me because he hated my family. Oh, my father. I can't speak. He hated my father. Is that true? Well, they did rather detest each other, not unlike yourself and Mr. Malfoy. And then your father did something Snape could never forgive. What? He saved his life. What? Yes, said Dumbledore dreamily. Funnily, the way people's minds work, isn't it? Professor Snape couldn't bear being in your father's debt. I do believe he worked so hard to protect you this year because he felt that it would make up to him and your father even. Then he could go back to hating your father's memory in peace. Harry tried to understand this, but it made his head pound, so he stopped. And sir, there's one more thing. Just one? Just the one? How did I get the stone out of the mirror? Ah, now, I'm glad you asked me that. It was one of my more brilliant ideas, and between you and me, that's saying something. You see, only one who wanted to find the stone. find it, but not use it, would be able to get it. Otherwise, they'd just see themselves making gold or drinking the elixir of life. My brain surprises even me sometimes. Now, enough questions. I suggest you make a start on these sweets. Bertie bots every flavored beans. I was unfortunate enough in my youth to come across a vomit flavored one, and since then I'm afraid I'd rather lost my liking for them. But I think I'll be safe with a nice toffee, don't you? He smiled and popped the golden brown bean into his mouth. Then he choked and sighed. Alas, earwax. Madame Pomfrey, the nurse, was a nice woman, but very strict. Just 5 minutes, Harry pleaded. Absolutely not. You let Professor Dumbledore in? Well, of course, that was the headmaster. Quite different. You need rest. I'm resting. Look, laying down and everything. Oh, go on, Madame Pomfrey. Oh, very well, she said. But 5 minutes only. She let Ron and Hermione in. Harry! Hermione looked ready to fling her arms around him again, but Harry was glad she held herself back, as his head was still very sore. Oh, Harry, we were sure you were going to. Dumbledore was so worried. The whole school's talking about it, said Ron. What really happened? It was one of those rare occasions where the true story is even more stranger and exciting than the wild rumors. Harry told them everything, Quirrell, the mirror, the stone, and Voldemort. Ron and Hermione was a very good listener. They gasped in all the right places, and when Harry told them what was under Quirrell's turban, Hermione screamed out loud. So, the stone's gone, said Ron finally. Flamel's just going to die? That's what I said, but Dumbledore thinks that what was it? To a well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure. I always said that he was off his rocker, said Ron, looking quite impressed on how crazy his hero was. So what happened to you two? Said Harry. Well, I got back all right, said Hermione. I brought Ron around. That took a while. We were dashing up to the gallery to contact Dumbledore when we met him in the entrance hall. He already knew. He said, Harry's gone after him, hasn't he? And hurtled off to the third floor. Do you think he meant you to do it? Said Ron, sending your father's cloak and everything. Well, Hermione exploded. If he did, I mean to say, that's terrible. You could have been killed. No, it isn't, said Harry thoughtfully. He's a funny man, Dumbledore. I think he sort of wanted to give me a chance. I think he knows more or less that everything that goes on here, you know. I reckon he had a pretty good idea we were going to try, and instead of stopping us, he just taught us enough to help. I don't think it was an accident he let me find out how the mirror worked, and almost like he thought I'd had the right to face Voldemort if I could. Yeah, Dumbledore's off his rocker, all right, said Ron proudly. Listen, you've got to be up for the end of the year feast tomorrow. The points are all in, and Slytherin's won, of course. You missed the last Quidditch match. We were steamrolled by Ravenclaw without you, but the food will be good. At the moment, Madame Pomfrey bustled over. You had nearly 15 minutes. Now, ouch, she said firmly. After a good night's sleep, Harry felt nearly back to normal. I want to go to the feast, he told Madame Pomfrey as she straightened his many candy boxes. I can, can't I? Professor Dumbledore says you are to be allowed to go, she said stiffly, as though in her opinion, Professor Dumbledore didn't realize how risky feasts could be. And you have another visitor. Oh, good, said Harry. Who is it? Hagrid sidled through the door as he spoke. As usual, when he was indoors, Hagrid looked too big to be allowed. He sat down next to Harry, took one look at him, and burst into tears. It's all my ruddy fault, he sobbed, in his face, in his hands. I told the evil git how to get past Fluffy. I told him. It was the only thing he didn't know, and I told him. Yeah, could have died, all for a dragon egg. I'll never drink again. I shouldn't be chucked out and made to live as a muggle. Hagrid, said Harry, shocked to see Hagrid shaking with grief and remorse, great tears leaking down into his beard. Hagrid, he'd have found out somehow. This is Voldemort we're talking about. He'd have found out, even if you hadn't told him. You could have died, sobbed Hagrid. And don't say his name. Voldemort, Harry bellowed, and Hagrid was so shocked he stopped crying. I've met him, and I'm calling him by his name. Please cheer up, Hagrid. We've saved the stone. It's gone. You can't use it. Have a chocolate frog. I've got loads. Hagrid wiped his nose on the back of his hand and said, That reminds you, I've got you a present. It's not a stoat sandwich, is it? Said Harry anxiously, and at last Hagrid gave a weak chuckle. Da, Dumbledore gave me the day off yesterday to fix it. Of course, he should have sacked me instead. Anyway, got you this. It seemed to be a handsome leather-covered book. Harry opened it curiously. It was full of wizard photographs, smiling and waving at him from every page were his mother and father. So now off to all your parents' old school friends, asking for photos. Knew you didn't have any. Do you like it? Harry couldn't speak, but Hagrid understood. Harry made his way down to the end-of-the-year feast alone that night. He had been held up by Madame Pomfrey fussing about, insisting on giving him one last checkup, so the great hall was already full. It was decked out in Slytherin colors of green and silver to celebrate Slytherin winning the House Cup for the 7th year in a row. A huge banner showing the Slytherin serpent covered the walls behind the high table. When Harry walked in, there was a sudden hush, and then everybody started talking loudly at once. He slipped into a seat between Ron and Hermione at the Gryffindor table and tried to ignore the fact that people were standing up to look at him. Fortunately, Dumbledore arrived moments later. The babble died away. "Another year gone," Dumbledore said cheerfully. Yes. Dumbledore said cheerfully, "And I must trouble you with an old man's wheezing waffle before we sink our teeth into our delicious feast. What a year it had been! Hopefully your heads are all a little fuller than they were. You have the whole summer ahead to get them nice and empty before the next year starts. Now, as I understand, the House Cup here needs awarding. The points stand thus. In 4th place, Gryffindor, 312 points. And 3rd, Hufflepuff with 352. Ravenclaw has 426 and Slytherin 472. A storm of cheering and stamping broke out from the Slytherin table. Harry could see Draco Malfoy banging his goblet on the table. It was a sickening sight. Yes, well done, Slytherin, said Dumbledore. However, certain events must be taken into account. The room went very still. The Slytherin smile faded a little. Ahem, said Dumbledore. I have a few last-minute points to dish out. Let me see. Yes. First, to Mr. Ronald Weasley. Ron went purple in the face and looked like a radish with a bad sunburn. For the best played game of chess Hogwarts has ever seen in many years, I award Gryffindor House 50 points. Gryffindor cheers nearly raised the bewitched ceiling. The stars overhead seemed to quiver. Percy could be heard telling the other prefects, my brother, my youngest brother, got past McGonagall's giant chess set. At last, there was silence again. Second, to Miss Hermione Granger for the use of cool logic in the face of fire. I award Gryffindor House 50 points. Hermione buried her face in her arms. Harry strongly suspected she had burst into tears. Gryffindor up and down the table were besides themselves. They were 100 points up. Third, to Mr. Harry Potter, said Dumbledore. The room went deadly quiet. For pure nerve and outstanding courage, I award Gryffindor House 60 points. The din was deafening. Those who could add up while yelling themselves hoarse knew that Gryffindor now had 472 points, exactly the same as Slytherin. They had tied for the House Cup. If only Dumbledore had given Harry just one more point. Dumbledore raised his hand. The room gradually fell silent. There are all kinds of courage, said Dumbledore, smiling. It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much courage to stand up to our friends. I therefore award 10 points to Mr. Neville Longbottom. Someone standing outside the Great Hall might have thought some sort of explosion had taken place. So loud was the noise erupted from the Gryffindor table, and Harry, Ron, and Hermione stood up to yell and cheer as Neville, white with shock, disappeared under a pile of people hugging him. He had never won as much as a point for Gryffindor before. Harry, still cheering, nudged Ron in the ribs and pointed at Malfoy, who could have looked more stunned and horrified if he had just had the body bind curse put on him. Which means, Dumbledore called out over the storm of applause, for even Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff were celebrating the downfall of Slytherin. We need a little change of decorations. He clapped his hands, and in an instant, the green hangings became scarlet and silver, became gold. The huge Slytherin serpent vanished, and a towering Gryffindor lion took its place. Snape was shaking Professor McGonagall's hands with a horrible, forced smile. He caught Harry's eye, and Harry knew at once that Snape's feelings toward him hadn't changed one bit. This didn't worry Harry. It seemed as though life would be back to normal next year, or as normal as it ever was at Hogwarts. It was the best evening of Harry's life, better than winning at Quidditch, or Christmas, or knocking one mountain trolls. He would never ever forget tonight. Harry had almost forgotten that the exam results were still to come, but come they did. To their great surprise, both he and Ron had passed with good marks. Hermione, of course, had the best marks in grades of the first years. Even Neville scraped through, his good herbology mark making up for his abysmal potions one. They had hoped that Goyle, who was almost as stupid as mean, might be thrown out, but he had passed too. It was a shame, but as Ron said, you couldn't have everything in life. And suddenly, their wardrobes were empty, their trunks were packed. Toad was found lurking in a corner of the toilets. Notes were handed out to all students, warning them not to use magic over the holidays. I always hope they forget to give us these, said Fred Weasley sadly. Hagrid was there to take them down to the fleet of boats and sailed them across the lake. They were boarding the Hogwarts Express, taking and laughing at the countryside, became greener and tidier, eating Bertie Bott's every flavored beans as they sped past Muggle towns, pulling off their wizard robes and pulling on jackets and coats, pulling into platform 9 3/4 at King's Cross Station. It took quite a while for them all to get off the platform. A wizened old guard was up by the ticket barrier, letting them go through the gates in twos and threes so they didn't attract attention by all bursting out of the solid wall at once, alarming the muggles. You must come and stay this summer, said Ron. Both of you. I'll send you an owl. Thanks, said Harry. I'll need something to look forward to. People jostled them as they moved forward toward the gateway, back to the Muggle world. Some of them called, Bye, Harry. See you, Potter. Still famous, said Ron, grinning at him. Not where I'm going, I promise you, said Harry. Ron, and Hermione passed through the gateway together. There he is. Mom, there he is. Look. It was Ginny Weasley, Ron's younger sister, but she wasn't pointing at Ron. Harry Potter, she squealed. Look, Mom, I can see. Be quiet, Ginny. It's rude to point. Mrs. Weasley smiled down at them. Busy here? She said. Very, said Harry. Thanks for the fudge and the sweater, Mrs. Weasley. Oh, it was nothing, dear. Ready, are you? It was Uncle Vernon, still purple-faced, still mustached, still looking furious at the nerve of Harry carrying an owl in the cage. At a station full of ordinary people, behind him stood Aunt Petunia and Dudley, looking terrified at the very sight of Harry. You must be Harry's family, said Mrs. Weasley. In a manner of speaking, said Uncle Vernon. Hurry up, boy, we haven't got all day. He walked away. Harry hung back for the last words with Ron and Hermione. See you over the summer, then. Hope you have a good holiday, said Hermione, looking a bit uncertain after Uncle Vernon, shocked that anyone could be that unpleasant. Oh, I will, said Harry, and they were surprised at the grin that was spreading over his face. They don't know we're not allowed to use magic at home. I'm going to have a lot of fun with Dudley this summer. And thus ends Book 1. I want you to appreciate this art, the original art for the Chamber of Secrets and this. Alright, well, I hope you enjoyed the last reading of the Harry Potter book. Um, I'm unsure if I'm going to choose a different book to read or start with the second book. It will all depend on how I'm feeling, but thank you so much for reading. My name is Carley. I'm okay, so my role in the system, I'm a gatekeeper, but I also try to keep everyone calm as best as I can, which, that, yeah. But hi, I like to read, and I'm basically, this series is helping me get out of my comfort zone, out of the box that I keep myself in because I like to hide away in the corner and read by myself alone. I don't really like human interaction. So this helps me get out of my comfort zone and do something that I love as well. So I hope you guys enjoy it. See you for the next volume of the book club, which is volume 2, and I don't know which it is going to be. So I hope you enjoy. Have a nice day. Thank you for watching. Also, our links are down below in the description. There's our partner systems YouTube channel as well as our Wattpad or Quotive, Zoe's old channel that she did since elementary school until like maybe the first or second year of high school. And yeah, I hope you enjoy everything that we do, and I hope that we can continue to have fun, great times. Have a nice day. Bye.